Welcome back to the Law&Crime Network. My name is Bob Bianchi. I'll be with you to 3 o'clock. And in the other case that we're covering, because we do multiple trials here, we can do 2 things, sometimes 3 and 4 at once here at this network. We have Jean Rossi, the Kemia Hassel case. She's a United States Army specialist. You see a picture of her there. She is accused and working in tandem with Jeremy Cuellar, who is also from the Army, into the co-defendant in the case. This case is severed, so the co-defendant's case, Cuellar's, will be tried in August, that they both were paramours with one another and that they planned and plotted to kill Hassel's husband, who also was in the Army. And supposedly, according to the state's theory of the case, it is alleged that Cuellar shot and killed the victim on New Year's Eve in 2018. The motive for this is $400,000 of life insurance money and a life free of any kind of divorce. They can just go on their own. Gene, I was quipping with my wife last night, and I'm like, you know, when you read cases like this, and how many of them have we had, right? How many of them have I prosecuted, where you're just like, dude, if you don't want to be with the person, your spouse, can't you just let them go? I mean, why do you got to go the extra mile? I understand greed, money, but we've seen lots of cases where the money isn't even at play. It's just that they just want to be free, and their way of getting free is to kill the other person. Come on, they share a child in common with one another. What is happening?
It's terrible. But in this case, I want to tell your viewers and listeners that $400,000 life insurance proceeds, it's tax-free. Uncle Sam doesn't touch it. The state doesn't touch it. $400,000 to Jeremy and Miss Hassel is a ton of money.
Yeah, it could equate to $750,000, $800,000 in real money. That's a great point, Gene. But you know, something that I found interesting as a homicide prosecutor, we really worked on when we were investigating a case is, when you suspect, or if a person's of interest that may be the spouse of an individual, the interesting dynamic that happens is that that spouse feels compelled to speak to the police because, you know, why wouldn't they? They don't want to make it look suspicious, and of course they're going to cooperate, and it's that kind of cooperation that we can use to break the back of them when they're speaking to the police and try to get them in a room and ultimately try to get a confession. It happens so many times. I can't think of a singular instance in which a spouse was killed that the other spouse didn't come in and say, yes, I want to cooperate, I want to help you. But if you did a bad thing, you could get jammed up, and many of them do for that reason.
Oh, absolutely. Was it Scott Peterson who made comments to the police after Lacey went missing? There's just many cases like this. But I got to say, initially when I saw this trial on Monday or Tuesday, I thought her defense is total baloney. But I got to tell you, you know, you only need one juror. She denied for 1 or 2 hours, maybe 3 hours. And then after being a little bit browbeat, arguably, by the police, she fessed up and said Jeremy did it. You can make an argument that her confession was coerced.
Well, we can definitely talk about the phenomenon of false confessions, which is a real thing. It's so hard to explain when you see it happen, when you're handling a case and you find it out, ultimately, because other evidence conclusively establishes somebody else did it. You're like, why would that person have confessed? It's really a fascinating thing to watch. So we'll be looking out for that, Gene. But to the point, it's her very own statements that got her jammed up. And one of them was when she was speaking to Sergeant Mike Lanier, who was the responding officer to the scene. And I think the first person that she spoke to, let's take a look. Okay, so Gene, I'm putting myself in the mind of when I was at homicide scenes, and then we were coming back and we're collecting evidence, and we're doing forensic analysis, we're canvassing the area, speaking to people, we're doing a family history, a social history. So this is the first responding officer, and he's testifying in court now, indicating that she wasn't necessarily completely truthful, that she had an extramarital affair, that there were money problems, and she didn't have a good relationship with her husband. Now, I have been there, literally, Gene, when the detectives were ready just to throw the cuffs on people just for that alone. And we would try to do the slow roll, if you will, especially the legal side, saying, whoa, we need to do more here, because people have extramarital affairs and don't necessarily kill their spouse. Yeah, it's a person of interest, but be careful that you don't exclude anyone else else too quickly. And in fact, in some cases, we found out it wasn't who we initially suspected it was. Got to go slow. Does it appear to you that they did dot their I's and cross their T's and were just suspicious at this point, but weren't jumping to conclusions?
Well, I assume this interview was right at the beginning, and there's not. It doesn't trouble me as a juror, unbiased juror, that she was trying to protect her affair,
right,
and keep it from the police. But then it seems like she is now confessing to the plan that was started in Korea and then carried over to the United States. That's very bad for Ms. Hassel.
You know, Gene, one of the people that we have here on the Law and Crime Network is Captain Jeffrey Paul. I was honored when I was prosecutor. He was my tactical operations captain. He is the best I've ever seen in the business, especially when it comes to taking statements. There was never a person, a lawyer, a doctor, a gang guy that did not give this guy a confession or a statement. He was very good and perceptive. But to your point, he used to say, people lie for all sorts of reasons. Doesn't necessarily mean you jump to the idea that they committed the homicide. Go slow, go deliberately, check all facts out. But as I told you before, Gene, this wasn't the only statement that she gave to police. She also allowed herself to be interrogated. I mean, why wouldn't she? She's the grieving wife. Let's take a look. Okay, so that is the defendant giving a statement in which he is confessing. Gene, I've never quite seen it done that way. I obviously haven't looked at the entire interview where obviously somewhere along the line, the detective found out the information or to have those questions printed up on a form, which he was saying yes to. And I'll just note for our audience so that they understand, this is after 7 hours of an interrogation. I know some people think that that's long, but I've seen interrogations go a lot longer than that and actually over days that have been upheld. The question, upheld legally, the question becomes whether or not the jurors are persuaded that she just caved in and just admitted to it because of undue pressure, i.e. the false confession. How do you think she did?
I think she did horribly for herself. Mm-hmm. The part of this video that I'm watching that is really bad is, and I agree, it's a unique style that the detective used. But he said, do you have anything else you want to add? And then after that, she extemporaneously just started adding more information that was inculpatory to her and also to Jeremy Cuellar. I mean, she just volunteered more information.
Yeah, you know, Gene, to your point, I noticed two things with this detective. The first is he fits the model as to how it is that you should be doing these interviews. You don't go in there like gangbusters with your gun and badge showing and shouting out Miranda, you know, making the person pucker up, as we used to say. He's calm. He's almost like assisting her. Even after she tells him the story, he's being gentle with her. He's extracting information. And I agree with you. That's what I noticed, too. And there may be more of this that we haven't seen, where when she's giving her open extemporaneous remarks and commenting on things that the detective has no idea of knowing the things that she's telling him, that becomes the most powerful part of the statement.
Right. I want to go back to the friend that you worked with for many years. Was his name Paul?
Paul, Captain Paul, yeah.
Captain Paul. I had a detective, Tom, in Arlington County. I won't embarrass him by mentioning his last name. And an FBI agent, Aaron, Aaron, and won't tell the last name. Those two law enforcement officials, they followed my mother's advice. You get more with honey than with vinegar. You don't go in there talking to a hardened drug dealer criminal, acting like you're, the big kingfish. You have to go in there polite, courteous, and you smother them with honey. And after about an hour or two, they're your best friend. Well,
to Captain Paul's testament, you know this story, Gene. I've said it before. It's the only time I've ever heard a motion to suppress a confession in a murder case I tried that Captain Paul was too nice to the defendant. That obviously, that legal argument obviously fell apart, but it was certainly a unique one. Guys, I love having Gene Rossi on because we could tell those old war stories, and courts are starting to light up again. We got some activity going on. Hopefully we'll be able to go live because they're on break. We're going to go to break right now ourselves. We'll be back on the other end. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Bob Bianchi. I'll be here till 3 o'clock. Kemia Hassel case. Gene, we were talking about taking statements, and our producers want us to talk a little bit more about this because I think it's really really a fascinating subject. I agree with them. It deserves a lot of attention. So when we're talking about that prototypically great interrogator like Captain Paul, there's a couple of elements, and we used to go teach a course about this. And the first is, you know, they're like lawyers too. You know, they're asking questions, they're waiting for responses. So sometimes teaching how to do it is about teaching them what not to do. For example, just asking crazy questions and not giving the person an opportunity to fully explain their answers. They're just going off a checklist, this question, that question, the other one. And then I'm gonna stop on this last one because one time my head almost exploded off my shoulders when they're asking the guy biographical information and, you know, what date of birth and where do you live, whatever. Guy's like, look, I just want to tell you what happened. And they're like, excuse me, sir, I'm here asking the questions. You're here to answer the questions. Now, what's your social security number? Guess what happened next, Gene?
You had a terrible interview. That's what happened.
Yeah, but you know what happens after, like, you make that guy pucker up? You know, I think I should talk to my lawyer.
Absolutely.
Boom. There's the end of that. So, you know, it's a real art form. It's just like us asking questions. Common sense, go slow, and always give them the emotional distance to confess that they did something by saying to them, Captain Paul would say it all the time. You could literally see the guy teetering. It was a beautiful thing to watch. And he would just say, look, I understand good people do bad things. I get it. All I want to be able to do is understand why. I know you are not a monster. You're not a bad person. You could see it, Gene. Boom. They start talking. Thoughts?
Absolutely. The other thing that used to drive me crazy is when they would talk over each other and the recording was just a total mess and you weren't sure of the answer. The second thing that used to bug me, I don't like leading questions. It's much better to get them to say it than you make the statement and ask for a yes or no. If possible, avoid the leading. And the third thing is, you know, Captain Paul, Agent Aaron, Detective Tom in Virginia, they were so nice that the people who were being interviewed felt, rightly or wrongly, that the interviewer was their friend. That's priceless. They
actually, and one of the, you know, would say to Captain Paul when he would read Miranda, thank you, because he would say, look, I want to be square with you. I want you to understand everything that's going on here. There's nothing, you know, you have a right to remain silent, and he goes through the whole Miranda thing. I just want, am I not treating you fairly? Yes. Would you like to speak to me now? Yes. I'm like, you know, it was just masterful in the ways they went about it. But something else that's really interesting too. Today, Dan Abrams has arranged for a few of us here at the Law&Crime Network to give a seminar at the American Bar Association with regard to media and rules of professional conduct 3.6. Gene Rossi, you know what I'm talking about, and 3.8F, which deals with the special responsibilities of prosecutors and what they can and can't say to the media. I'm going to give you something that goes beyond the RPCs as a prosecutor. I gave out as little data as possible for one very, very important reason. When the targets and witnesses were being interviewed, they weren't going to be able to say that they gave that information based upon media accounts that they were watching or that they were reading. So if a defendant confesses and starts giving particulars that no one else in the world could know, he can't say it came from TV, which happens.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think it was the Boston Strangler. There were copycat people who were going to the police, wanted to be arrested as the Boston Strangler, because they were reading all the newspaper accounts and they were giving the police information that they read in a newspaper. And there was at least one person who said, I'm the Boston Strangler.
Well, you know, life's got to be pretty bad when you need to walk into a station and confess to a crime you didn't commit. I mean,
John Benet Ramsey, there was a false confession.
Yeah, well, these interrogations are very, very interesting. Let's listen to a little bit more and come back on the other end and talk to Gene about it. Gene, this is exactly what we were talking about. He's basically saying, I want to be able to explain. You know, I'm convinced you were involved in it, and I want to be able to explain your side of the story. Just like I told you with Captain Paul. And him saying, I get it. If there's anyone else that gets it, it's me. And he's working like you guys were a match with one another. And he was using common sense to explain how the relationship was going here, making her feel comfortable, giving her that emotional distance. And what I love, and I'm going to give you a general, what do you think? What I love is that in the end, he got her to say they planned it in Korea. They never intended to execute in Korea. They were going to execute it in the United States. That's one of those small little details that somebody that's falsely confessing would have no reason to say unless it were true. Thoughts?
Oh, I thought he did a good job. And, you know, it's a lot harder rightly or wrongly, it's a lot harder for a male detective and an officer to interview a woman who's been accused of murder. If they had a female interrogator, it may have been a little bit easier, but he did a good job. He did a very good job.
Yeah, great police work there for sure. Well, it's a fascinating case, as all the cases are here at the Law and Crime Network. We're going to have more Gene Rossi. Court is starting to get active in that Hassel case. We're going to go to break. We'll be right back.